So if you're looking for a telephoto lens, this is definitely the one to get. While I haven't used all the telephoto lenses out there, this one is phenomenal. This is closest to the 70-200 GM2 that Sony made, but at half the price point of $1489. The Sigma 70-200E mount. This was the lens that a lot of us had been waiting on Sigma to develop. So this is it, 2.9 pounds. So it is on the heavy side. It's got 11 rounded blades. It's got 20 elements in 15 groups. The front is a 77mm filter thread, so it's not actually that big on the front end. And then we can just look at the back really quick. Right here, just twist. And now we can rotate if we need to. And right here on the bottom, you're able to take it off. So if you're looking to get into wildlife photography, sports photography, even landscape photography with a telephoto, it's pretty fantastic because you can get some very unique shots. Or portrait photography, because let's be real, a 70-200, you can just get some incredible looks. You see how my background looks behind me? I'm at 70mm right now at an F4. Let's dial it back just a little bit and throw it to a 2.8. It got a little lighter because I didn't mess with my ND filter, but you see how that background looks with that extra stop in there? That background just looks so nice. That is what this lens is about. The clarity of this lens is incredible. And the minimum focus distance on this lens is great as well. When you're at 70mm, it's at a 0.59 feet. So think about how close you can get to the lens and get some great focus shots with extreme compression on there. So you get a very tight close-up in focus shot with extreme compression to allow you to get some unique looks. So now we're at 200mm, amazing compression, great clarity still. Once we get to 200mm, our minimum focus distance is gonna change. I'm gonna duck down so I can be still in the camera. Our minimum focus distance now is 3.28 feet. So we're not gonna be able to get as close as we were. So it does have a variable focus distance. Now this lens has a variable focus distance limiter button. So you can have it set to different areas of focusing. So you don't always have to have it focused on the whole thing, the full area. You can make sure that this lens is just focused on a certain part of the image and it's not gonna go back and forth trying to grab focus like it would if you had it on full. So that is one cool thing about it. It's got a clickable and declickable aperture ring, so if you don't like that sound, you can turn it on, but it does have that fun little aperture ring that you're able to use. It also has an OS button, a 1 and 2, and Sigma developed this optimal stabilization. 1 is basically used for everything, whereas 2 is more for your sports and your fast-moving panning shots or anything like that. Then there's a couple custom buttons, so you can set that to whatever you want to set it to. It has an AFL button, and last but not least, it has the autofocus manual focus switch. And because of that, let's talk about how great this thing is at autofocusing. So let's do a little autofocus test. We're at 70mm and I'm just gonna walk from the side, straight up, in focus, step out, step back in. It's doing a pretty good job. Now let's see if it stays focused on me as I walk around a little bit. And it's doing a pretty good job. Like I've never had any issues using this lens. And I've let a lot of people use this lens and borrow this lens for sports or whatever it is because they might not have it, and they have also never had any issues with it. Sigma has done a bang up job with this lens. Now let's throw it to 200. So now we're at 200mm. Pretty good. Right on me, not super fast, right? It wasn't like split, but it's nothing that's really gonna ruin your shots, in my opinion. Now, if you need something faster, obviously you go native glass, but this will work just fine for most of y'all. So if I move, jump down, up, right? You see it was still grab and focus. When you're coming out of frame and then back in frame, it's trying to find what to focus on because you can see it's gonna pull that in focus. I'm gonna step back in and it's still grabbing me very, very fast. Even if I duck in, did a pretty good job right there, right? It's also splash and water resistant, which is very nice. And my favorite thing about this, it has internal zoom. It's the same length at 70 as it is at 200mm. Also, Sigma put their HLA motors in there. There's high linear response actuators or something like that. And it's super quiet when it autofocuses, so that is even better. If you ever used the Sony GM1, you knew that it autofocused loud and it missed a lot. The autofocus on that thing was not that great. But that's GM1. GM2, completely different story. So the filters are off, we're at an f4.5, and the reason I do this is just because sometimes those filters can distort the image just a little bit and it not look as clear. So I wanted to make sure we didn't have that issue. And now let's look at some B-roll and some photos I've taken with this lens.
I took the 7200 to Hvar, Croatia. Now this is with the Pocket 3 non-color graded, but we're gonna look at some 7200 photos really quick of these roofs. So that gives you perspective of what it looked like with a Pocket 3 and its 17mm field of view. But these are the shots. You can see how close we can get to these buildings and just the kind of look you can get doing something with the 70-200, right? But these are also edited. So let's go look at the raw photos. You can see there's some vignetting up in this corner, so we'd have to get rid of that. And there isn't much chromatic aberration going on in this image at all. And this is at a f5. You don't really see much in any of these areas, but we can always remove the chromatic aberration in post and enable profile corrections like I'll do now. And you can see there's some barrel distortion. Not too significant, but it does exist on this lens. Now, if we go and look at some of these other images right here, so this next image right here, we can see a boat going out, and let's just take a look at it. You know, there's not much chromatic aberration going on. You would see it usually around these darker areas and on these lines right here on the edge of things, but there's not much going on with this lens for that, which is great news. Now we can obviously always remove it, and you can see there's some right here along this edge right here. If I remove it, you can kind of see it just go a little bit, but there's not much for it to take away. Now, the same thing, this is at 200mm at an f2.8 this time, and you can definitely see it corrects the barrel distortion and corrects the vignetting that you would have on this image.
Now, there are a couple cons to it, right? It is a little heavy, and because it's not a native Sony lens, it's a third-party lens, you're limited to about 10 frames per second because that's what Sony does to their cameras. The other con to this is if you're a fan of using a lens hood, this probably has one of the worst lens hoods I've ever had to use. Now, you may love this, I personally do not. They put this knob on it. You see that? That knob right there. So in order to get it off, you can't just twist. It'll twist around and you won't be able to get it off. You have to go to this knob, twist it, and then go all the way and untwist it, and then you can take it off. So if you're somebody that's used to just being able to twist it and drop it really quick into the grass or whatever so you can get the shot, it's a little more difficult to use just because you gotta throw it on here, and then we gotta twist it all the way versus just being able to throw it on and twist it like you do. But is the lens hood, the weight, and the frames per second an issue for you? It could be. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing sports, you're wildlife, and that's mainly what you're trying to get something like this for, then you're gonna have to deal with those limitations that Sony set on there. Now, it's not a Sigma thing. It is a Sony thing that they limit third-party lenses. Now, is an annoying lens hood, the weight and the frames per second limitation worth paying an extra $1,300, $1,400 to get the 70-200 GM2? I personally don't think so, but I don't do a lot of sports photography. I don't do a lot of wildlife photography, but to somebody that's doing that, it may be a huge limitation that you do not want to deal with, because I completely would understand that. But saving that money, getting something like this, yes, it's on the beefy side, it's a bigger lens, but it holds up when you compare it to any other telephoto lens out there.